Okay, so today we're looking at Module A of the HSC Standard English course, which is Experience Through Language, and we're looking at the elective distinctly visual. And we're going to unpack the syllabus description of what this module requires us to do. So before we start, you should have your copy of the syllabus description out in front of you so you can annotate it as we go. Right, so we're looking at experience through language. This is the overview of the whole module, and then we'll get into the elective. So it says we need to understand how our perceptions of and relationships with others in the world are shaped in written, spoken, and visual language. So the how part is the first important thing we noticed, because we need to understand how our perceptions are shaped. That means analysing the use of techniques. So that's when we're looking at our literary techniques of language and form and structure. We're looking at our perceptions. So that is about the subjective way we look at text, our own view of the world and the way that we see it and the way that we interact with it. We're looking at our relationships with other people and with the world. So that's our interactions with both individuals and with our own surroundings, our communities. So we're looking at perceptions of and relationships with, so the way we view and the way we interact with the people around us, with our world, our community and society. So how do we perceive those things and how do we interact with them? So we're looking at how those things, how our interactions, how our perceptions are shaped in written, spoken, and visual language. So we're looking at those three things. We're looking at written language, we're looking at spoken language, and we're looking at visual language, which also means things like images, our visual literacy, film techniques, but it could also be about the structure of a text and its form. And the effect that those things have on meaning and on our perceptions. So if we move into looking at distinctly visual, so I'll just read through it, then we'll go through. In their responding and composing, students explore the ways the images we see and or visualize in texts are created. Students consider how the forms and language of different texts create these images, affect interpretation, and shape meaning. Students examine one prescribed text in addition to other texts providing examples of the distinctly visual. Now the first thing that I've underlined here and put in pretty pink is that you're expected to respond and compose. So in your responding and composing, it doesn't just mean responding, it's also about composing and creating and be able to use the techniques to create distinctly visual images as well. And you need to be able to show in your responding and composing the ways that images we see and or visualize in text are created. So ways, again, ways is looking at the how. How are the images created? Images, which I've circled, is probably the most important word in this module because we are looking at the distinctly visual. What we're looking at is how are images created in our own mind and how do those affect meaning. So we're looking at both images that we see, so a visual image like a painting or a photograph, but we're also looking at images we visualize. So images that are created by 10 points, imagery in texts, and looking back on some of the other modules and texts we've looked at this year, you should be able to think about some imagery we've already looked at and how that creates a visual in our mind. So we're looking at the ways those images are created in texts. Students are also going to consider how the forms and language of different texts create those images and affect interpretation and shape meaning. So when we're looking at forms and language, we know we're looking at language techniques, is what we mean by language, and our forms is the kind of text we're looking at, anything structural, anything that's not a language technique, basically, of different texts create these images. So it does three things. The forms and language, they create the images in our mind. They affect our interpretation. Now we're looking at that word affect, which means it has an effect on us. Affect is what impact does it have on us as a responder. affect interpretation? So how do they change or impact on our interpretation? And how do they shape meaning? So how do those forms and language of different texts create the images, affect how we interpret the world and the meaning, and how does it shape meaning? So you're also going to examine one prescribed text, which for us is going to be Maestro, and you're also going to be looking at other texts, so related material that provide examples of the distinctly visual. So we know that it's only in Module B, our close study, where we don't have to look at related material. Here we are looking at related material, which tells us, flags to us, that this is a conceptual study, not a close study. So we're not studying Maestro as a novel, we're studying distinctly visual, and in class we're going to focus on Maestro showing us the distinctly visual and also some other texts as well. So these are a few things to get out of this syllabus description. So an image is a particular aspect of language. It's a very emotive aspect. It's an aspect that we connect with quite a lot. We know that humans are quite visual beings and we like imagery. We like to create pictures in our mind, and we know that that's the best kind of writing. So also in this module, you're going to explore the ways in which images are constructed and how they're interpreted. So how do you make the image? How do you create that image in your responder's mind? But also, how does that shape the interpretation? How do the words you choose and the way you construct that image, how does that change the interpretation, both that you want somebody to have and that they just have themselves? So there's three key ideas we're exploring. The first one is how language, which is, we remember from the beginning, written, spoken and visual, creates images. How does language create images? How does how images shape and influence meaning? So how do these images create meaning for us? And also we need to look at the cultural and literary significance of images. Why are some images very significant to specific cultures? Why do we like images? Why are they important to our understanding of our own world? And some other ideas to consider could be, what makes some images distinctive? What makes them memorable or influential? Why do we remember them? Things like Van Gogh's Starry Night. Why is that such an important image? Why is it so distinctive? And also, what different types of textual forms and media use images in everyday life? Where do we see images? Where do we have imagery created? Do we hear it on radio commercials sometimes? Is imagery used quite a lot in print advertisements? Is it used in television shows? Where are we seeing this kind of imagery in our lives? So hopefully now we have a better understanding of what we're going to be looking at in Module A, focusing on the distinctly visual.